Hey everybody, welcome to Away Games, the Chicago Cubs podcast. I'm back. I wasn't here last week. If you're a real completist of the Away Games series, maybe you noticed that I was briefly written off the show. This is Kevin. Over there, it's Adam Mamawala. How are you, Adam?
I'm doing fine. I'm doing fine. How was your traveling?
I think it was fine. I don't know. Do you ever feel like this where someone asks you like, "Oh, what you been up to lately? What happened?
hmm
Where you been last week?" And you just like genuinely can't pull it up. I feel
Oh
like
yeah,
you're
yeah.
yeah, does it, I feel like you're a more organized brain than I am, so maybe that would
Right. I
happen
can
last
I can remember Brian Dunsing's ERA from 7 years ago, but what was I doing last week? Fuck if I know.
week. Yeah, exactly. So I think they were fine. I definitely was in Los Angeles for a few days. I was in Virginia also, but it was around a bit. Three times in the past 2 months, I've been very close to a tornado on my travels, so I think I'm being sent a
Huh.
message from above in a very spinny and aggressive way. But
Yeah, kind of a final destination thing here.
it is, yeah, exactly. So we'll see. We'll see if I can make it to the trade deadline. But the we're on Twitter at Away Games Pod if you want to follow us and talk to us there. And yeah, we got some things to talk about right now. We've got the return of some pitchers on their way back. We've got a debuting catcher, hopefully pretty soon to talk about. We've got Adam. Have you trademarked a nickname based on your own name, like Hayden Wesneski just trademarked Wesnasty officially?
Well, I believe it was Joe Madden when we had him on as a guest who coined me Walla Banger. So I think I'm sticking with that one. I
That's
believe you were free and I was Walla Banger.
Yeah, it was just free, which might be difficult to get as a trademark. I
Yeah.
think.
Well, Mike
Also,
Pelfrey's not using it. He's done.
there you go. Yeah, I saw that guy in person on my travels in Wichita. Sick brag, Wichita. Shockers legend Mike Belfry was there as the pitching
Oh, I
coach.
just thought you meant like on the same Southwest flight, and you're like, "Hey, Mike."
Mm. Yeah, it was funny. I know you went viral for a Southwest moment you had on
hmm
stage doing check-in. I was on a Southwest flight in the fall and then realized I was on with like the whole Chicago MLS soccer team.
Oh wow.
And they were in Group C and I was Group B. And I felt like, man, MLS is a different level from these other sports organizations, I think.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I feel like no professional team should fly Southwest ever.
Yeah, at least be in the A group. Yeah, if you're going to do
That's
that.
true.
So yeah, what do you want to start with today, Adam? We got a number of things going on.
Well, I think it's kind of appropriate to do a month in check-in because I mean we're basically a month into the season, maybe a couple days more. The Cubs are a game over 500. I think they're 15 and 14 is
Yep.
exactly what their record is, and there have been some ups and downs along the way, but it's kind of where I thought they'd be. Like
Hmm.
I think we both felt, and you maybe were a little more pessimistic than I was in our predictions, but like to me, this felt like an 81 win team that if things broke right, they could maybe win 88 games, and if things didn't, they might win 75. And I think that's like kind of still where this team is. The thing that does encourage me is that we are above 500, and this isn't the best team that the Cubs can put on the field. So
Yeah.
if they start doing that, and if Taillon comes back and is healthy, and if Hendricks comes back and is healthy, and if we get some bullpen help, and a lot of ifs, but like
Hmm.
if certain things happen, I do still think that this team has an outside shot at a wild card. But um, yeah, I mean the weekend series against Miami was super frustrating. Getting swept in general frustrating, but getting swept by the Marlins, one run games for all three. That
Yeah.
was the thing that the Cubs had avoided thus far this year was like I don't think other than that first stretch when they won opening day and then lost three in a row, I don't think they had lost three until it happened over the weekend, like losing three in a row.
Yeah. And
So
it's away, it's at Florida. Florida's better than I think most people probably assume, but also, when you won a series in Los Angeles 2-1 that could have been a sweep. When you've took a series against Seattle, when you've played
San Diego
decent.
too.
Yeah, and San Diego too. That's right. When you played better against better teams, or at least equivalent teams, it's a real bummer to get swept against a team that shouldn't even be in the league, should be contracted. No one cares about them. The only time they win is when a criminal just builds them up before tearing them down. So I mean, like, this is, the Marlins shouldn't exist to begin with, which makes it extra frustrating. And yeah, I mean, they've been a farm team for our announcers, Len and Boog, obviously. So I guess thanks for that. But yeah, it's tough. I think as a month in check-in, you said this isn't the best team they could have out there, which is true in a number of ways, because Taillon's been out, and he wasn't really what I think his true level is before that.
Right.
Taillon, by the way, just threw a simulated game, so Taillon, it looks like, is going to be back in the rotation next week. And as we speak today, on Wednesday, Kyle Hendricks is starting in Iowa. So, and once you're starting games in Iowa, you're a game or two away for, basically a week or two away, probably, from Hendricks being back too, and maybe that rotation getting a little more crowded. And then, of course, there's, you have Matt Mervis and Christopher Morel, who are destroying AAA right now, who are probably the two guys who had the best shot to break the team out of camp among those who didn't. And we're sitting here every day with Eric Hosmer doing what Eric Hosmer has done for the past several years. So it's not new. And I mean, when you lose 3-1 run games over the weekend, those margins do matter, like having someone a little better up, which we've got a couple down there, that matters, and that could matter at the end of the season, when.
And the main thing Hosmer provides at this point, other than leadership, which is nothing, but like beyond that, in terms of on the field stuff, is his defense. And we saw yesterday he had a kind of a rough moment defensively, which is, you're not going to trash a guy for making an error. Like, everybody makes errors, it happens. But yeah, the idea that we're justifying having Edwin Rios around when Morel is right there, and he's had big league experience. This is not a guy you're calling up for the first time. It is a little confusing to me, because I don't think it's not like anyone's suggesting that we try to put people in the big leagues to not set them up for success. Like, these are people who are proving that they're capable in AAA and have been doing it for a while now. And yes, like, Mervis might come up and he might struggle and hit 180 and you send him back down. Like, that is a thing that could happen. There is a big difference between AAA and the big leagues, and some people make that jump and some people don't.
Right.
But this Cubs team is designed to be on the margins, to your point, and like, if they are to compete for a wild card, those few games are going to matter. So the longer you go into the season where you're losing winnable games, the more you're up against it in terms of even having a shot to make the playoffs. I think right now Fangraphs probably has the Cubs at like between 15 and 20%, which
I saw it was a little over 20, which I know Pittsburgh has banked a lot of wins right now, but I saw Pittsburgh up at like 35%, which I thought was, I mean, it's an expanded playoff, so that's part of it. But also, I mean, I guess the wins are wins. And when the games are in the past, we can talk about run differential or whatever you expect to be, because I see a lot of that. I'd be like, oh, the Cubs' run differential is so much better than what their record is, which it is, and that's neat. It's neat to a point. Is it predictive? I don't know, maybe. But also, you look at the offense of the Cubs, and I think we have a tendency as fans to see players who are playing great and be like, well, they'll just keep doing that. And then the players who are bad, well, of course, they'll get better. But unfortunately, those things tend to move in both directions. You regress and progress to the mean, typically. And we're sitting here with several guys who are killing it, beyond what they do or what they have done in their careers to this point. Like, Patrick Wisdom's on 11 homers, and it would be an all-star if the game was played today.
61. He's on pace for like 60.
Yeah, he's killing the ball. Cody Bellinger is basically prime Cody Bellinger right now. And I mean, those things could continue. It's possible. But also, we're sitting at 15 and 14 while we've gotten starts that hot from that many guys. And so it's tough. I mean, then you look at the Cardinals, who are sitting there at 10 and 20, which is funny, at this point, but you expect them to get a little better too, right? And it is, as bad as that is, that's only, they're 5 games behind the Cubs right now, basically. So, Yeah, I mean, I think I certainly didn't expect better than this. And individually, it seems like the starting pitching has been across the board encouraging.
Hmm.
I mean, Hayden Wesneski's been the least effective starter. His ERA is around like 4.4 right now, but the last couple games he's been better.
Yeah, Smiley's been great.
Smiley's been really good. And again, Smiley is a guy the Cubs have under contract for another year after this too, which is really
Yeah.
helpful too. And Kyle Hendricks got smacked around in his first minor league rehab start. But
Hmm.
I mean, yeah, I don't think you're counting the results too much either way there. It seems like the velocity is he's back up
Right.
in the high 80s, which is what you want. And yeah, and we'll see what happens there. But 1 month in, this is, I would say it's a little better than I expected.
Yeah,
But
my
yeah.
my barometer kind of is like for as long as the Cubs remain above 500, I will continue to be encouraged by that.
Hmm.
But we're also recording this on Wednesday morning, and this is a point where like, okay, yes, the Marlins aren't bad. No, you should not get swept by them or probably
Hmm.
by anyone if you're a good team. But the Nationals are very bad, and
Very bad.
this is a series that you have to take. You should. It would be great if you could get all four. Obviously,
Hmm.
that's not going to happen. You got to take 3 out of 4 here. You got to win today and tomorrow. You cannot go into Washington and split those games and expect for that to be good enough for you to have a chance at the playoffs. Like you do have to beat these teams, and it was great to see the Cubs do that in Oakland, right? Like that's a series where you go
Yeah.
out there in your mind, you're like, well, they're probably not going to sweep. It's the West Coast, they struggle out there, this and that, but they got the job done. They won all three of those games, and that's what they need to do now. But to your point about the rotation, I mean, I don't know where you stand on this, but Stroman has been very good. He's had
Hmm.
a couple rough, I would say rougher starts, but obviously he set the bar pretty high
Right.
initially. Steele has been unbelievable, and what really impressed me about Steele in his start against Miami was like it was like a John Lester start. It was like when someone who's that good goes out, they don't have their best stuff that day, but they still make it through 6 innings and give up 3 runs, and that's still a quality start. And that like it's easy when everything's going your favor and your ERA is 1. But I think the
Hmm.
real test of a pitcher getting to that next level is being able to battle through not having their best stuff. And it's not a small sample size anymore. I mean,
No.
we're looking at Steele at this point, and I'm going to be very careful with this name, but like when you look at that stretch that Arrieta had from like, All-Star break of 14 through the next whatever, like it started to be real. And I think when you look at Steele now, you've got the second half of last year, the first half of this year, where his ERA is what, 1.5?
Yeah, it's under
And
two for
this is
basic.
not a 5 game stretch here. This is a lot of starts, and it's cool. I feel like I don't know how you feel, but knowing that not like he's our buddy, but like we've talked to the guy 3 times, I feel like we've kind of like talked to him at different stages of his career, and it's very cool to see. Like this is what you dream about, and it's happening.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy who I think is one of those sort of classically, like, I mean, like the last Cubs homegrown, and you can argue, quibble about what homegrown means exactly, but Kyle Hendricks was traded for, then played in the minors a bit with the Cubs, and then came up. Kyle Hendricks never made a top 100 prospect list, and Kyle Hendricks is one of the 10 best starters in baseball for about a 5 year stretch. He just was. I don't care what. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't care if you don't like how many strikeouts he had, the runs given up, the innings provided, all that. He was a top 10 pitcher in baseball for like a 4 or 5 year stretch. So that, and I think Justin Steele's a guy who, when we hollered at him years ago when he was in the minors, one of the reasons I found him interesting was because this was a guy with a pretty good pedigree coming out of high school, a left-handed starting pitcher who seemed athletic and whose velocity was higher than most left-handed starting pitchers at that time. And he had a couple injuries in the minors, but he got results and kept starting the whole time through. And I felt like this is a guy who seems to be overlooked. And I don't think he ever made a top 100 list. He made, a number of Cubs top 10 prospect, I think, that kind of thing. But yeah, he's pitched like a number one or number two starter for going on for basically last year and this year so far. And it seems as long as he's healthy, relatively sustainable stuff. So that's amazing. And then Drew Smiley, like you say, he's been really really good, and he's a guy who's also been good when he's been healthy for the most part in his career. And yeah, if Hendricks has anything coming back, we're starting to talk about like 6 starters here now, and that's
Yeah, I mean, my assumption is that if Taillon and Hendricks come back let's say in the next month, whenever that may be,
Hmm.
that your rotation is probably Stroman, Steele, Taillon, Smiley, Hendricks, and then Wisniewski goes back down, or you use him as like a spot starter? Like what? I feel like he would be the odd man out probably.
I think that's probably true at this point. And I mean, injuries happen with the starters as well.
Hmm.
So it may not even come down to having to make that decision. That's why you have depth. But Wisniewski also isn't going to come in and throw 200 innings this year. He didn't throw a ton of innings last year, even though he was great once he was over here with the Cubs. So this is a thing where you want to manage the sort of the staircase up of how many innings you're throwing per year. So you would probably have to dial Wisniewski back a little at some point anyway. But we'll see. That'll hopefully be a problem when we get to it. Bullpen's been
Right.
a little weirder. I mean, there are good guys in this bullpen. I like seeing Estrada up right now. Keegan Thompson's had a lot of struggles. He's walking as many as he's struck out, and he's looked funky sort of since spring training. He's just looked a little off. His command hasn't really been
Yeah.
there, and he's not missing any bats. And I think that might be a guy who we do see maybe a surprise option used on soon to see if he can get himself right, or maybe he just needs a little rest.
Right.
I'm not exactly sure, but he just doesn't look right.
Yeah, and obviously we had Michael Rucker on Friday in Miami, who just completely like fell apart, and
Who's been great
that's
otherwise.
probably, yeah, and that's probably not the number one person you would go to in that situation if if you had your druthers, but everybody has games where they struggle. But when you're hitting back to back batters to load the bases with nobody out in the bottom of the ninth, it's tough to watch.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's a guy who's been quietly really good. Otherwise, he looks unassuming. He is another guy who you don't hear a ton about, and the stuff doesn't appear to be crazy. It's not like Estrada stuff or something. But has been pretty good for the most part.
Yeah, and
So,
I think it's bullpen arms are always their failures are always magnified because they're
yes.
such a small part of the game. Like I almost feel like the way we look at relievers, it's like how people think of kickers in the NFL. It's like you
Yeah.
really kind of don't notice it unless they mess up, and then everyone's like, "Oh, what the hell?" It's like, yeah, but he made the last 15.
100%. You expect people to be perfect, and if they're not,
Yeah.
then how dare they, right? Because they just they show up, and they tend to show up in a lot of moments that are very important. And yeah, you just it's a tough role if they're listening to any
Mhm.
meatballs out there, reacting to it. So
Yeah, and it's also because of your job, you're not able to work through it, meaning that like
mm,
if you are Justin Steele and you're having trouble finding your command in the first inning and you hit two guys and walk in a run or whatever, you
mhm.
still theoretically have more time to work that out. And same thing, Caleb Killian came up and got a spot start
Yeah,
and 5 runs scored, all with 2 outs, which is brutal.
yeah.
But they needed innings out of him, and it was I imagine that Ross probably took him aside and was like, "Look, it's not ideal, but we got to get more out of you. Like, get back out there. We
Well,
cannot ask for not 8 innings out of our bullpen."
and it's interesting because that afterwards, Ross said he's got more work to do. He's not ready yet. I think is what he said. And okay, if he's not ready yet. We thought that. We saw what he did
Hmm.
last year, and it's not like he's been killing it in the minors since. He had a really dominant stretch at the end of 2021, I want to say, where he was perfect through 6 innings in the Arizona Fall League Championship game. His velocity was really popping, and it seemed like there was really something there, and there still could be. But he hasn't been right really for the whole second half and really second 2/3 of last year and this year. And this is another thing where there's other choices. Ben Brown is a guy who's been dominating in the minors, and that's not the guy they went to for that spot start when everyone knew Caleb Killian wasn't ready. So it's just weird watching the choices that they're making on the margins here. That, and by they, I mean management and whatever input Ross has. And from what Ross was saying after the game, I feel like David Ross would not have advised Caleb Killian to be that spot starter, but it's what he was given, And I think at this point, Killian just he has to he has to go down and just be in the minors for a while, and you kind of can't think about bringing him up because it seems like it's something that's maybe as much mental as it is physical. And that's not me saying he's like weak mentally or anything, but just he clearly is not ready for this moment in this moment. And I think we need to stop messing with that for a while.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me a little bit of when we saw Braylon Marquez up in I
Yeah,
think it was
what's up with that
2020,
guy?
where yeah, we were so excited about finally seeing him after all this hype, and then I believe it was a game against the White Sox, and he just was all over the place, and it looked
Hmm.
like the moment was too big for him, and it's a bummer because there are people who, for whatever reason, if with the bright lights or whatever the leap is in terms of talent that they're facing, they just can't make that leap. And that doesn't mean that that's a forever thing, but it means that yeah, you just might not be ready yet.
It means it's not right now, and everyone knew that before the game. This is not hindsight. And to watch the Cubs make those decisions is, I think, what is particularly maddening. We knew it. You didn't
Yeah.
need advanced analytics. Like, if you follow the
Right.
system at all, you know that Caleb Killian shouldn't have been getting that start.
And then it feels like you're punting a game basically.
Right.
And the Cubs, I think that was a game they lost 7-6, and 6 runs, I think, generally speaking, should win you a baseball game, especially if you're a team like the Cubs who has good starting pitching and
Right.
even with the bullpen issues. But like when you're down 5-0 after the first inning, you're up against it. And credit to the
Yeah.
Cubs for battling back, but you're not going to win a whole lot of games where you give up 5 runs in the first inning.
Yeah, in terms of a guy who's coming up who is a little more interesting, so Yan Gomes got tagged with a follow through swing, and they're being cagey about whether it's officially concussion protocol or what. But I think they were saying like he was being monitored.
Concussion adjacent.
It's concussion adjacent. I feel concussion adjacent every day of my life. But the Cubs called up a former and possibly current, still depending on what rankings you're reading, top prospect Miguel Amaya. Let me read you a couple things about him. So they brought him up, and Tucker Barnhart started yesterday. I would love to see Amaya get a start and get actually into the game today. I believe he's 24 years old. This is a guy who played he's been in the Cubs system since he was signed in 2015. He signed for 1.25 million. That's a big international bonus when he was, God, 15, 16 years old at that point. He was in the futures game, the MLB futures game, twice before 2019. That's how long he's been around and been sort of considered a top prospect. But he had a bazillion injuries. He had a strained forearm, sprained ankle, a Liz Frank fracture in his foot. Liz Frank, a lady I went to grade school with. Hey, Liz, what's up? He had one of her fractures in his foot. 60. He's only played 64 games in the last 2 seasons, and he's never had an at bat in AAA, which to me, I've heard about Miguel Amaya for so long, and that's crazy to me. I mean, the fact that he's played in 2 futures games before 2019 and he's never gotten a AAA at bat is like, holy shit.
Skipping triple. I mean, who is he? Nico Horner? I mean,
Nico,
what's going on here?
yeah, exactly. Let's hope. But this is his last year with an option. So this is the last year he can even be bounced between the minors and the majors, and he had never been to AAA to this point. And when he's been in the past couple years, he's got good patience. He has good raw power, and he's been praised for his work behind the plate by pitchers. But what does that mean? Sometimes something and sometimes not. But this is a guy who it's cool to see up because there's some ceiling on this.
It's very cool to see him get a shot, and I do hope in the next day or two, especially depending on. I'm sure he will if Gomes is out for some period of time, which it seems like he is. Because also the thing we haven't mentioned is that the Cubs, I guess did they waive Torrens or option him?
So yeah, I believe they had to DFA him, and I haven't seen if Torrens has been called up. But that's another one. This team was carrying a third catcher for
Right.
which we did not have that luxury. I don't think. Obviously, it would be fine to have him right now, but I mean, I think that's in terms of optimizing your roster. That was maybe a spot that we didn't need to be doing that with, and I'm fine with it. If the Cubs get to hang on to Torrens, great. If not,
Sure.
God bless.
Yeah. But a cool moment related to Miguel Amaya, my friend Amy, who's a Cubs season ticket holder, and she was the person who hooked it up when Ken and I got to go on the field at Wrigley last year. She's doing like the old MasterCard commercial thing where she's trying to see every stadium this spring and summer.
Oh, in a year? Wow.
Yeah, in
Ambitious.
1 year or so, and like blogging about it and all that. I should find out what the link is. But anyway,
Yeah.
she was at the Nationals game last night, and she brought a sign that said, "Welcome to the Bigs, Miguel." And obviously he didn't get into the game, but she was able to find someone on the Cubs staff and was like, "Hey, if give this to Miguel if he would want it.
Hmm.
And it appeared in his Instagram story later. He kept it and put it in his hotel room. So that was kind of a cool moment.
Oh, that's really nice. That's cool. That's
Yeah.
a good on Amy for being a good Cubs fan with a nice welcome. Or is she a Cubs fan or is she a Nationals
No, she's a
person?
Cubs fan. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah,
I believe
that's
she made the marquee broadcast with some sort of Hayden sign
Oh,
welcoming
okay. Look
Hayden
look at
Westburg.
her. She's getting a good amount of
Got the
airtime,
signs,
both
yeah.
both traditional media and new school on the Insta too. Good for her.
Exactly.
That's very cool. Yeah, this is and as we do as we've done the sort of God, we're almost 20% into the season. Look back at the first month. I was trying to pull up what this upcoming month has for us schedule wise. So Cubs are finishing off against the Nationals this week. Then the Marlins, Cardinals at the Cubs for the first time. So that'll
That
be
first game is going to make me really angry, and I'm trying to prepare myself for it mentally, but it's not going to be good when Wilson steps in there.
yeah, yeah. This is I've spoken plenty on it, and maybe we'll have to address it one more time after this series, but I have never been so embarrassed by goofy ass Cubs fans as I since Bartman, I think,
Yeah.
as they've been and prominent ones, some prominent blogs or prominent blog singular that has
Hmm.
been really disappointing.
And real quick
And
before we get into the schedule, shout out to the Peacock, the stellar Peacock broadcast crew on Sunday for going on a
I
5 minute tangent about Steve Bartman after a caught foul ball down the right field line.
not even the right side, not even the right foul line, and not the right stadium.
20 years later, several championships later for both teams. Let's keep talking about a guy who never wanted to be talked about in the first place. Let's do
Yeah.
that.
How about the shortstop that the Cubs got from the Marlins, Alex Gonzalez? Do we have anything to
Mhm.
say about him in that inning? Do we know, or we're
He's the
just
luckiest guy in the fucking world.
he really is. So we've got a fun week. The fun continues. Cheer if you're cheering Wilson, please let us know at Away Games Pod. Only the first time. You don't have to cheer. You don't have to cheer him at all. Really, he's a Cardinal. But but if you particularly boo him, I think you're gross. I will say that personally. I think you're a fucking dummy. And then the Cubs versus
Like
the
and
Twins.
subscribe.
Yeah, like and subscribe, me daddy. And then the Cubs and Twins after that, Cubs and Astros after that, Cubs Phillies, Mets Cubs. Are you noticing a theme here, Adam? That's a lot of good teams in a row.
Hmm.
And
I
then
tell you what, if you get through that Houston, Philly, New York stretch,
mhm,
anything better than like 4-5, you got to feel all right about that.
absolutely. Thankfully, there's a reprieve. Fingers crossed, knock on wood, jinxing it now versus the Reds at home. And then the Rays, Padres, Angels. Rays Padres basically is how they end the month. So this is another tough stretch of the schedule, and I think we'll have a much better idea when we're doing the check in at the end of May.
I mean, I think the Rays heard our season preview podcast and wanted to make me look like an asshole because I should have known better than to ever think that the Rays would not be great for reasons that are unclear.
I think we both did not pick them for the playoffs, but both said, or maybe you picked them for the playoffs, but not to win. I forget exactly. I think
Yeah.
I didn't pick
We
them for the
both knew
playoffs.
that we were risking our
I think we
reputation
I
by
think we
picking against
both
the Rays.
said, and you can call us on this if this is incorrect, but I think I was just like, they're gonna, but I don't want it. And basically it was
Right.
just like I'm just not picking it. So yeah, they're good on them. And goof on us, none of us picked the Pirates to be first. So what about that?
What do you think the odds are that the Cubs are above 500 a month from now? At the end of May, what do you think?
I think I think it's maybe 45, 55. I guess I would say I think it's close to even money that they'll stay even, basically,
Right.
because I think the starting pitching is just good enough to keep them in most games. And if the guys who have been breaking out, having outlier positives, not even stay exactly there, but close to it, and you
Mhm.
get a little progression. I think there's a decent chance. It's nearly a coin flip, but I guess if I was putting money on it, I would say they would be at or below as opposed to at or above, but it's very close.
Yeah.
How you feeling?
I think about the same. I mean, I feel like you're going to really have to bank some wins early this month if you expect to get through that gauntlet of Houston, Philly now that they have Bryce Harper back,
Right.
and the Mets. And, I feel like the Reds historically, even when they're bad, always give the Cubs trouble. So I'm certainly not looking at that series saying like, oh, that's an easy sweep, because sweeping ain't easy. As Benny Officer
Sweeping,
said. And,
it's yeah, get it, copyright it. Yeah.
so we'll see. I do feel very strongly that you got to go out and win these next two against Washington. Like, you have to take advantage of these situations against the bottom teams in the league. And I tell you what, while I was watching the game on Monday, it looked a bit like Oakland in our nation's capital. It was pretty bleak. I know it's a chilly Monday evening, but still.
Just nobody there. Yeah, I mean, fair enough. The bad teams are really bad this year, which is also, yeah. Yeah, it's one thing. The final thought I had just this past week is, fan wise, while I'm pissing off potential Cubs fans, there was a lot of sort of cocky dunking about how good the Cubs were and how dare anyone doubt them online in the first couple weeks of this year, and I just want to say they are 15 and 14, and because people think maybe they're not a juggernaut, and if you're, say, a Cubs podcast or Cubs writers who allow that possibly this isn't a perfectly constructed gem top to bottom, that's not being a hater. Maybe that's close to the truth. Maybe we're dunking a little early in an embarrassing way. Some of us out there, little goofy when you're dunking at 11 and 7. You can be happy about it, but maybe tone back the cocky. It's a long season, so.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. When do you think we will see the likes of Morel and Mervis, or are we just going to be doing this all season?
I don't think we can be doing all the season. I think it's been obvious for a couple of weeks what should happen, and I think it's just going to progress to the level of embarrassing and indefensible by the end of this month. I have to think it's before the end of this month that certainly one, and I'm fingers crossed both. I think we're going to see them by the end of this month. That would be my prediction. I could be wrong, but I just don't think it's defensible like to continue in this way. So.
Listen, whatever happens this coming month, if by the end of the month the big league roster includes Taillon, Hendricks, Morel, and Mervis, I'll feel good about that.
Yeah, totally. I'm down with that too. At Away Games Pod on Twitter, everybody. Any other things we missed, Adam? Any personal news? Any vibes? Any,
I got nothing but no vibes.
No, nothing but no vibes. I guess I'll be in Buffalo, May 18th and 19th, and I'll be in Cincinnati May 20th if anyone wants to see me. That's my out-of-town stuff coming up this month. Otherwise,
cool. I'll be in Colorado, and I think that's the main out-of-town thing, so Colorado and New York. But if you're in Boulder, you come see me.
Go!
May 11th, 12th, 13th, and 14th, Thursday through Sunday out there.
The king of Colorado over here lately, really dominating.
The people have embraced me there. The Colorado Sea looks very much like the Cubs Sea, and I have to think that that's what's happening.
I think that's part of it. Chris Bryant now up to several home runs and an OBP over 370. So just letting people know.
There we go.
Thanks everybody. Thanks for listening. Catch you later.